The anti-Canadian environmental charity Tides Canada is changing its name now that everybody knows who they are and what they've done. But I'm going to make sure you never forget. After almost 2 decades of sabotaging the Canadian oil and gas industry, Tides Canada is undergoing a bit of a facelift. Now, don't get me wrong, Tides Canada isn't changing who they are or what they do. They're just rebranding to try to greenwash their past away from the recent memories of Canadians. They're still going to be the killers of the oil and gas industry and the killers of Alberta. However, Tides Canada will just do that under a new banner. Tides Canada is now going to be called makeway.org. Look at this from their new website. In 2000, a small group of change makers and philanthropists asked, how can we foster a healthy planet and a just Canadian society? Inspired by the model of the US-based Tides Foundation, they set up Tides Canada to provide tools to support philanthropy and created a unique shared platform that powers social change initiatives across the country. Now, from the outside looking in, that sounds kind of nice and benign, but these people are destroyers of pipelines and destroyers of prosperity, and we shouldn't ever forget that, no matter what they call themselves. We know through the research of independent journalist investigator Vivian Krause, who examined U.S. tax filings, that the parent charity of Tides Canada, San Francisco-based Tides Foundation, was behind the campaign to landlock Canadian oil and gas. Look at this article from the Financial Post from back in 2016. If Tides-funded activists were to act as honest brokers, that would be fair, but that's not what Tides does. Tides funds the tar sands campaign, an international effort that aims to embarrass Canada, deter investment, and stigmatize Alberta oil as the poster child of dirty fuel. The goal of this campaign is nothing short of stopping the export of Alberta oil by pipeline, rail, and tanker. Tides launched the tar sands campaign back in 2008 with funds from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and other U.S. donors. Tides Canada admits, though, this rebrand is because, well, too many people have figured out what they're all about, and it's hardly charitable. By blocking Alberta energy, they're making way for generational poverty for Indigenous people and making way for Putin to get richer, helping Russian state-owned Gazprom, and making way for human rights violations of bloodthirsty oil regimes like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. Because that's what happens when the world gets less Canada. The world doesn't use less oil, they just use someone else's oil, and then those countries get richer while Canadians suffer. Now, here's the press release from Tides Canada about why the rebrand is happening here. A national charitable platform, Tides Canada, changes their name to Make Way, defining itself anew after years of misinformation. Today, Tides Canada announced it has changed the organization's name to Make Way. No organization takes on a name change lightly, but it was clear that the time has come to define ourselves. For too long, we've been defined by others, said CEO of Make Way, Joanna Kerr. A quiet leader in environmental and social justice philanthropy in Canada for the last 20 years, the organization says they sought a name reflecting the momentum of change it enables. In these tragic and hopeful times, Make Way's purpose is ever clear. The gaping inequities laid bare by the virus and the anti-racism protests crystallize how much justice matters. New leadership is rising, and the dramatic changes needed to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss seem more possible. More of us are seeing our interconnectedness. Right now, there is an opportunity for transformative shift, and it is time to make way for nature and communities to thrive together, said Kerr. Smear campaigns about Tides Canada have repeatedly misconstrued the purpose of Tides Canada's international philanthropic funding and have also conflated it with US-based Tides Foundation. Tides Canada was singled out by the Premier of Alberta during the launch of a 2019 public inquiry to scrutinize international funding for the Canadian environmental movement as being anti-Alberta. This very expensive, unpublic government inquiry has yet to say anything, probably because there is no boogeyman. Only 1% of Tides Canada's funding has gone towards pipeline-related activities since 2005. Instead, we have been proudly partnering with international and Canadian funders to protect vital marine and terrestrial environments and support Indigenous stewardship, said Kerr. Now, that's how Tides Canada gets around being accused of being anti-pipeline. They say, oh, we're just protecting these vast tracts of land, but then they're off limits to pipelines. Now, to rebut that claim that only 1% of Tides Canada funding has gone towards pipeline-related activity since 2005, well, that's because the parent of Tides Canada, the Tides Foundation, uses a complicated spiderweb funding network that works to obscure just how much money is going to which causes and to do exactly what. Here's an article by Gwyn Morgan that relies heavily on Vivian Krause's research to detail what Tides Canada has been up to in the past few years, and it isn't good. The Victoria-based Dogwood Initiative received millions of dollars from Tides Canada to run Get Out the Vote campaigns in the 2017 BC provincial election, including deploying a throng of campaign workers in the riding of Green Party leader Andrew Weaver. After his election, the BC government wound up in the hands of an NDP Green alliance bent on fighting the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. Money was also funneled to campaign activists working to help the Liberals win the 2015 federal election. Vancouver-based Lead Now received directly and through the BC-based Sisu Institute more than $1 million from Tides Canada to actively work for the defeat of then Prime Minister Stephen Harper's Conservative government, which supported expanding the oil and gas industry. And now, with Trudeau in power, these activists that once played an instrumental role in blocking billions of projects from Alberta using hippie mob pressure tactics, well, now they're using government powers and government influence to stop Alberta from getting fair market value for our resources. You see, these activists have fully infiltrated the federal government to the highest levels. Former Tides Canada Vice President Sarah Goodman is a climate policy advisor for Justin Trudeau now. And activists from either Tides or Tides Canada linked groups like Marlo Reynolds from the Pembina Institute ended up as Catherine McKenna's chief of staff. Gerald Butts, of course, became the chief advisor to Justin Trudeau. He's formerly of the Tides Foundation-linked World Wildlife Fund. Likewise with Zoe Karen, the former chief of staff to the former Natural Resources Minister Amarjeet Sohi. See what I mean? Infiltrated. You see, Tides wants us to forget who they are and what they've done to Canada's oil and gas industry. They get to start fresh, while Canada's oil and gas workers deal with the economic carnage caused in their lives by Tides Canada and their tar sands campaign. We won't be forgetting who Make Way really is anytime soon. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. There might be a pandemic and there might be a real plague of journalists not holding Justin Trudeau to account during the pandemic, but that's not going to stop us. If you'd like to support the journalism that we do here at Rebel News, please go to helprebelnews.com.